Hey everyone, it's Colin. How's it going? Nintendo, I have just one question for you. What the hell? So in the odd event that you haven't heard this news already, unfortunately, I'm going to be the one to break it to you. About a week prior to when this video first went live, Nintendo announced that it is discontinuing the NES Classic Edition. And I know it caught me by surprise, and based on the reaction that I saw, it caught pretty much everyone by surprise. And I think it's because it really didn't make any sense. We hadn't been communicated anything along the lines of why it would get discontinued or when or for what reason, or that there were even any signs that Nintendo was thinking about pulling the plug. Sales were continuing to go gangbuster. I mean, granted, quantities have been very, very limited ever since the thing came out about 6 months ago. But, you know, it's just a real head scratcher. And I've come up with a couple of ideas as to what may be going on. I will admit that I've been generally staying away from the news about this topic, and specifically a lot of the editorial or op-ed kind of pieces about this topic, simply because of knowing that I was going to do a podcast episode about it. As soon as I heard the news, I'm like, that's got to be a topic that I cover. And I didn't really want to get anyone else's ideas in my head in the time between hearing the news and actually talking about it with you. So NES Classic, about 6 months old. It's just been selling whenever stores have gotten them, right? It's been probably the hardest product to get a hold of. It's easier at this point, I feel, to get one's hands on a Nintendo Switch than it has been ever to get one's hands on an NES Classic. And I did a previous episode about why I thought quantities were so limited. In general, it really felt like it was an artificial scarcity type of situation. And I feel like it continues to have been an artificial scarcity kind of situation. It seems like about every month or so, we'd get a new quote from Nintendo PR or one of its executives, you know, kind of talking about other products, but they would also mention NES Classic, and they would say things along the lines of, we know people want this, we know demand is high, we're working on it, we're trying to make more of them, we're trying to get them out into stores as quickly as possible so people can buy them, yada, yada, yada. Even 1 month ago, from when I'm filming this, Nintendo executives were saying that same thing, that they understand demand is high and they want to try and get product out on the store shelves, and they're continuously working, and they know it's frustrating, they're apologizing and all of that. And perhaps it's because of that relatively short time span between them saying, look, we're working hard to get you the product that you want, and then now, just seemingly out of the blue, Nintendo saying, well, yeah, it's done, we're going to stop production, and at kind of the end of April, that's it, right? We're done. That's what I think has really caught everyone by surprise, because it doesn't follow the traditional pattern for how or why products get discontinued. It's usually after sales just completely drop off and the product's been around for a long time. So that leads us into some of my thoughts as to why this could have happened. Why is the NES Classic being discontinued? Now, I don't necessarily believe all of these reasons, okay? Sometimes people think that because I'm talking about a reason, that's what I think is happening and I believe it. I'm just laying out options. Remember, these podcasts are mind exercises for you to go through. I'm just trying to give you options and information to get you to come up with your own opinion. So one reason why I've heard that potentially NES Classic could be getting discontinued is because of production capacity and or lack of parts or shortage of parts, something along those lines. No, I don't think that's very likely. I don't think that's very likely at all. Production capacity, we know Nintendo is making Switch at a faster rate than they've been making NES Classic. We know Nintendo probably makes a number of other products at a faster rate than it's been making NES Classic. In terms of parts shortages, I highly doubt that as well. Now, I didn't do my own teardown video on the NES Classic for various reasons, and we'll probably talk about that another day. If you're a patron of mine on Patreon, you've probably already read the quick little article I put up there at one point in the past. But basically, the NES Classic on the inside is nothing special. It really isn't. It's just a very, very simple kind of low-end Linux computer. It uses an all-winner ARM-based SoC chip. It's just got a small little flash memory chip that all the ROMs and the OS is stored on. It's pretty much empty on the inside, right? It's just like this single circuit board that everything is on. The parts cost for a device like that is got to be pretty minimal. You know, my guess, I haven't tried to figure this out. I haven't read any of the articles that talk about what the estimated parts cost is, but my guess is it probably maybe $10, maybe $15 to manufacture in terms of just the hardware. If you have any better information about parts cost on the NES Classic, hit me up down in the comments. Let's try and get some accurate information going. You know, so from a parts cost concept and scarcity of parts, they're pretty common parts. They're used in cheap Android tablets and all these other mobile devices. There's nothing that special about it. So production capacity, you know, pretty sure Nintendo can get more production capacity if it wanted it. Parts cost or parts availability, no, doubt that either. There is a good and interesting argument that I've read or can theorize about that's also kind of cost related, and it's about the licensing for the actual games on the system. Maybe there was something going on there. Now, obviously, we have no details because that's going to be very, very privileged information that Nintendo is going to keep between it and, you know, the publishers of the games that they licensed to put on the NES, at least of the ones that weren't Nintendo first-party titles. There may be something going on there where the license cost ended up being too high for what Nintendo wanted to pay in the end, or maybe the contract was written in such a way that as sales of the console grew, so would royalty payments or something. We don't know, but there potentially could be something going on there with the licensing of the software that's caused Nintendo to take another look at it, realize this isn't sustainable or this isn't in our best interest long term or whatever, and opt to pull the plug. Again, I don't think that's very likely, but at least it's a bit more plausible than something related to, you know, production shortages, parts, whatever. Another theory that's supported by rumors that came out right around the time I filmed this is that Nintendo is going to be coming out with a Super NES Classic towards the end of 2017. Now, I have no doubt that something like that would make a lot of people happy. But the whole idea of releasing multiple versions of these mini systems seems just a bit inelegant to me. Simply because of the way the whole thing is set up. It's designed to be this all-in-one box, right? And it's got an HDMI out and a USB in and controller ports on the front, and the controller ports are kind of proprietary, you know, for the system. The controllers look like an original NES controller. So if Nintendo came out with an SNES Classic, it would probably follow the same model. But what about the people who want to own one of each? Are you going to end up with all of this cable spaghetti mess hooked up to your TV? I mean, what if they do an N64 Classic after that? You're going to run out of HDMI ports on your TV if you want them all hooked up. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Nintendo to continue that form factor if it's going to be one in a series of products. That said, in some extent, Nintendo's already kind of done that because there's a whole Famicom Classic that they came out with in Japan that models on the original Famicom console, which was very different than what we got, say, here in North America. But even then, they didn't sell both of them in parallel in the same market, right? You couldn't get an NES Classic in Japan, just like we couldn't get a Famicom, you know, Classic Mini, whatever they called it, here in the US unless you imported it. But while it doesn't necessarily make sense to me on some levels, at least, well, I would be willing to bet that the rumors are probably true and that Nintendo will be doing an SNES version of this. And they'll probably just turn it into this yearly limited edition thing, coming out with maybe an N64 at the end of 2018. I suppose time will tell on that one. What's so bizarre about the whole situation is just that, Nintendo has never really done this kind of thing before. The closest analogy that I can think of are the white and black new 3DSs that came out around Thanksgiving for Black Friday here in the US. They were the smaller size and they were an all white or an all black design. It was just a flat $100 for the console. It's like the cheapest price that console had been sold for. And it was a Black Friday only thing. When that shipment sold out, that was it. Granted, it wasn't really a special product otherwise, right? It was just a different color, but it was the same internals and everything. So Nintendo didn't really have to do a major investment in its production line to make that product happen. But going into it, everybody knew this was a Black Friday only deal, right? It was pretty well communicated, I feel, that those particular consoles, when they sold out, that was it. You were done. If you weren't in line on Black Friday to try and pick one up, it would be difficult for you to get one. I don't remember anything along those lines for the NES Classic. I don't remember a single bit of information about Nintendo saying this was going to be a limited time kind of thing, that it was going to be a short period of time. But now Nintendo, after they've announced the discontinuation, is kind of telling a different tale. And we'll come back to this in a little bit. But I've got an article up on the screen in front of me here from Polygon talking about this discontinuation. And there's a little blurb in here from a press release talking about through April, Nintendo of America territories will receive the last shipments, and they encourage anyone who wants one to get out there and try and find one now, basically. They understand it's been difficult for many customers to find a system, and they apologize for it. It's really kind of a very non-committal type of answer. They basically just said, yeah, we discontinued it. Sorry, it was hard for you to get, but that's it. There was an interesting little follow-up to that. IGN got one additional little statement out of Nintendo PR. Here's the quote. NES Classic Edition wasn't intended to be an ongoing long-term product. However, due to high demand, we did add extra shipments to our original plans. Since when? Is the first thing that comes to mind. Since when? NES Classic Edition wasn't intended to be an ongoing long-term product. Did they ever say that? I sure don't remember. And maybe my memory sucks. And if it does, please be sure to hit me up down in the comments and correct me here. If you can find a link or something from back when the NES Classic launched that talked about how it was going to be a limited time product, I sure don't remember that. And here's the reason why I think Nintendo discontinuing it now and starting to tell this story about, well, it was a limited time product, was a recent decision. And it goes back to my previous podcast from around the time, actually it was on launch day for the NES Classic. It's actually one of my more popular videos, which I'm surprised about. And I was going through all of the reasons why NES Classic is hard to find. And the company, it sold out right away and everyone knew it and it became hard to find. And Nintendo basically said, look, we miscalculated the market. It basically said it expected the primary demographic for people buying the NES Classic to be people in their, say, 30s and 40s. Maybe they have kids. They haven't played video games in a while, but they'll see it and they'll remember, oh, hey, I remember playing Nintendo as a kid and maybe my kids would like it. So they'll pick one up and they'll buy it and it'll be a pretty inexpensive kind of non-committal type of purchase. And supposedly one of the reasons why NES Classic sold, so many more than Nintendo expected. It was harder to find was because all the diehard Nintendo fans went and bought it. Well, no duh. But I think Nintendo was right about the first part, because to me, that is the perfect target market long term for NES Classic. It's people who are walking through the store. Maybe you're walking through Walmart or Target or another big box retailer. You're pushing the shopping cart. You got a load of groceries and clothes and socks and all the other stuff you buy. You're walking through the electronics section and you see an NES Classic sitting on the shelf. And because it's there and you look at the price tag of $60, you go, well, that's cheap. I haven't played Nintendo in a while. That sounds like fun. Hey, I remember some of those games that are included with this. And my kids might like it. I'll pick it up. So you grab one, you throw it in the cart. It's an impulse buy. But because Nintendo is now saying NES Classic Edition wasn't intended to be an ongoing long-term product, that pretty much negates what Nintendo said earlier about it being this impulse buy type of product. If it's limited time, it's not going to be sitting on the shelf. But sitting on the shelf, readily available, is exactly how Nintendo would sell a ton of them. So here's what I think actually happened. I think Nintendo decided it wanted to change its marketing strategy for how it sells its products in general. Ever since around Christmas time, December 2016, I've seen very few 3DSs on the shelf. And that, of course, ties into relative stock shortages of Switch. And some people are saying they've been having trouble finding accessories and even finding copies of games. I think Nintendo has decided it wants to go all in and try and copy a company like Apple. And how Apple can fairly consistently get people to line up at its stores or do these massive pre-orders right before products launch and just sell them out in one big batch and then continue to sell them out. Nintendo seems to not want to really keep much product on the shelf. Some companies do that for bookkeeping reasons, but Nintendo isn't in a market that works really well like that, right? It's not just for diehard people. It's for casual gamers as well. And casual gamers need decent stock. They need to be able to go into a store and realize, you know what, that looks like a fun thing. I'm going to pick it up, instead of have to get into this whole cycle of following the news and following all the reviews and the features and the hype and getting all pumped up for it and staying up late and getting in line really early in the morning at a store or doing a pre-order and hoping it goes through, and just all the crap that us diehard video game fans have to go through to get one of these. The average person doesn't want to do that. And I think that's a really wrong way to go, but Nintendo seems to want to head that direction completely. And that went completely against the way the NES Classic is best sold. I think, Nintendo maybe realized that if it kept the NES Classic on the shelf, it would get stocked next to all those other kind of cheap all-in-one type of game consoles, like those At-Games reproduction Genesis and Atari consoles, where it's got like 30 games in there and most of them suck, but few are good, and they're cheaply made and they go for like 30 or 40 bucks. I think Nintendo maybe realized it would just end up having the product sitting there, and it would be hard to compare. It would be hard to stand out long term if Nintendo just pumped out a ton of NES Classics and got them on the shelf so that they were always readily available. I think maybe Nintendo just made this marketing decision that it didn't want to dilute its brand that way. Do I agree with that? No. I don't agree with that at all. I think Nintendo wouldn't be diluting its brand, especially since the NES Classics would more likely be shelved right next to Switch and 3DS and the games and everything. And Nintendo could even, instruct its retailers that you need to do that. It could kind of force them to do it, to put it in a certain place in the store. But that's my best guess, is that Nintendo wants to try and keep the hype machine going, and that by killing NES Classic, they will then have another opportunity later on to maybe bring it back and fire up the hype machine again. And before I wrap this up, I'm going to give you one little note. At the bottom of that same Polygon article, which I'll link to down in the description, there's a little quote from Nintendo talking about the Famicom Classic Edition, that version that was sold in Japan. This product has ended production for now. When production is being resumed, we will tell you on our website. Maybe there was a little bit of a mistranslation there, but that seems pretty cut and dried to me that Nintendo may be bringing it back later on. So with that, I'm curious as to your thoughts, your ideas, your suggestions, your general feeling about this whole thing. It's something that I think a lot of people have gotten worked up, myself included. Be sure to leave your thoughts, your ideas. Why is Nintendo doing this down in the comments below? Just try to be nice, right? We want to try and be nice to each other and all that. I understand you're pissed at Nintendo. I'm pissed at Nintendo too, but let's try and keep things at least a little bit more open-minded and constructive if we can. If you like the video, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at thisdoesnotcomp. And as always, thanks for watching.